As we're going into the message, we're in this series, and as Jesus is King. Somebody say Jesus is King.
Jesus is King.
And I remember just talking about our first part, which was last week, and we spoke about how the shepherds, heard the angel, and how the angels were the ones that were the voice of God after 400 years of silence between the Old Testament and New Testament. And we learned how we were able to just see how God can use even shepherds who would have no credibility at that time, and a number of things that we learned last week. And today we want to continue that series. And today we want to just talk about, what does that kingdom look like? Because Israel went through so many kings, and they were longing for a king. They were looking for someone to lead them. And as they were looking for a king, no king could really lead them. No king could help them because they were all failed. They all failed to bring perfect peace. They all failed to lead the people. And then we see Israel actually become slaves to many nations, many empires, like the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Greek Empire, and then finally, when Jesus is born, it's the Roman Empire that is in place. And so we see there's a great leader actually called Herod. And so today we're going to actually be talking about what is this kingdom look like? What does the kingdom of God look like? What does Jesus being king mean? And so I remember just back in August, there was remember in Popeyes had introduced this new chicken sandwich. How many tasted the chicken sandwich from Popeyes? And so this was this new chicken sandwich that Popeyes actually tweeted out, saying, "Hey, we have this chicken sandwich." And a week later, actually Chick-fil-A goes and talks about their chicken sandwich, and which is the next slide. And so they say bun, chicken, and pickles, love, Chick-fil-A, here you go. And then that same day, actually Popeyes responds to Chick-fil-A with another tweet, say, "Y'all good?" And so. And so there's this just feud, not just feud, but just saying, okay, which chicken sandwich is best? And this was this incredible interaction, and the media outlets actually went crazy on this, and it just went viral. And so in 15 days, the Popeyes chicken sandwich sold out. 15 days. And when I heard about this, I naturally had to go to Popeyes and I said, "Hey, listen, I need to go get this and check out the sandwich because everybody's talking about it." And the next slide, that's the line that was right there at Popeyes, right here in Mount Vernon. As I'm driving by, it's like, it's out the door, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna wait. And so finally in the afternoon, I was able to go and taste the sandwich, and it was good, but it was not Chick-fil-A, It's But just 14 years ago, Twitter didn't exist, right? Social media was not a thing. But today we have Facebook, Instagram, we have Google, it's all part of our everyday lives. It's a part of our culture. No matter how much you want to avoid it, or maybe just be disconnected from it, it's part of life. It's part of our language. It's part of what we do. It's today we're gonna have this sermon on YouTube, and we have a Facebook page, and we have an Instagram page, and like everything. This is our culture today, 2019. This is the culture. And when we look at Chick-fil-A, they're the third largest restaurant chain in America, just by system-wide sales, and they have a unique culture. And how many have ever been to a Chick-fil-A? See, okay, you don't really see it around here. But if you were to go to Jersey or even to Manhattan, you can find a Chick-fil-A. And there's a unique culture. Even when you just step into the restaurant, there's a whole different culture than McDonald's or Wendy's or Popeyes, right? and you're affected by that once you step in. And one of the most notable characteristics of their culture is that they are closed on Sunday. They're closed on Sunday. And you know, this album we were talking about from Kanye West, Jesus is King, one of his songs actually speaks about that. And he takes this, you know, play on words, right? Closed on Sunday, right? You're my Chick-fil-A, right? So he's talking about this culture of Chick-fil-A, how that they chose to close on Sunday. Now, if you had a restaurant business and, you know, you're not looking to go out of business, and you're thinking maybe, what would be maybe one of the biggest sales days I would have? You would probably think about maybe Sunday. People who want to go out as a family, but closing on Sunday and closing a restaurant on Sunday doesn't make sense. That's not culturally normal. But Chick-fil-A is not just closed on Sundays, but they actually close on Thanksgiving and on Christmas as well. And I was reading about what the founder said. He said the final step in his 5-step recipe for business success, he was saying that I was not so committed to financial success that I was willing to abandon my principles and priorities. One of the most visible examples of this is our decision to close on Sunday. Our decision to close on Sunday was our way of honoring God and of directing our attention to things that mattered more than our business. And I was reading another article where it talks about the history of Sundays. And it read like this: Americans once had a very narrow choice of permissible Sunday activities. And in this book, The Peculiar Life of Sundays, Stephen Miller writes that there were so many arguments in the United States, especially in the 19th century. Sunday legislation was the second most debated subject after slavery. Because there were different opinions about what you could do and you couldn't do on a Sunday. And those opinions began with the Puritans who settled in New England in the 1630s, and they called it strict Sunday observance. And Sunday was a day for church going, and you know, this blue laws actually made everything else illegal. And this is why in New York you can buy beer 24 hours a day, except for Sundays when beer cannot be sold from 3 a.m. to 12. Did you know that? I didn't know that. But New York's law banning liquor sales on Sunday has its origin in Puritan America and even the Roman Empire. So the earliest indication that it says that I was able to uncover about a specific law prohibiting activity on Sunday comes from the Roman Empire. Constantine in the year 321. Can you believe that? How long ago? All right. And so the Roman Empire, or the King Constantine, when he got saved and established the Christian culture, which included what you could do and couldn't do on Sunday. So think about what culture has done, right, in America and all over the world. Culture is these attitudes and behaviors, characteristics of a particular social group. So I want you to think about, when you think about culture, I want you to think about attitudes and behaviors. Attitudes and behaviors. Attitudes and behaviors. Somebody say attitudes, and behaviors. Attitudes, and behaviors. It's how I think and how I act. How I think and how I act. So in the American culture, there's a way of thinking and a way of acting. So the Sunday culture today, all right, when it comes to church, on average, 69% of the U.S. adults were members of a church between 1998 and 2000. But between 2016 and 2018, only 52%. And that's a drop in 17% in less than 20 years. So that's a cultural shift. There has been a cultural shift of what Sunday is supposed to be like. What are we supposed to do on Sunday? Right? What are we supposed to do? And so as Jesus followers, right, for those who choose to follow Jesus, is there a culture we follow? And if so, what does that culture look like? What does the culture of Jesus look like? What is it, and the lifestyle, the thinking and the behaving, the acting, what does that look like? Because if we're choosing to follow Jesus, there is a culture, there is a way of life, there's a way of thinking that must follow what he determined as the culture of those who follow him. And that's what we're going to learn today. So let's pray. Thank you, God, for just teaching us through your word. We're just here as students. Disciples mean learners, students, those who choose to follow Jesus and choose to learn and to grow. Your word is able to transform. So today, you're going to transform minds. You're going to transform lifestyles. You're going to do a heart change in people today. You're going to bring healing. You're going to break all forms of bondage today. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. And someone said?
Amen.
Amen. Our text comes from Matthew chapter 2. And Matthew chapter 2 to the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All right, we have these accounts of Jesus' life. They are not supposed to be biographies. They're not supposed to depict Jesus and his whole life, because actually his first 30 years of his life is not really talked about much. All right, and so these are about accounts or eyewitnesses, those who were there and just sharing with us what actually took place. So Matthew chapter 2, starting with verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied, "but this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may what? Go and worship him." Verse 9. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures, and they presented him with the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. How many of you have ever seen maybe a play, a Jesus play, or the Christmas play, or have watched it on TV, and you've seen the wise men, and they always depict these wise men as three, right? Because they brought three gifts. But the Magi, as the scripture is talking about, was not just three men. It was a company of men who were actually astrologers, and they were very wise. They actually traveled from the east. Today we would actually know that area as Iran. So Iran is where they were coming from, and so as they're traveling, they were advisors to royalty. They would serve in palaces, and so for example, if you were to look in scripture, you have magi and astrologers and these advisors in Nebuchadnezzar during when we read about Daniel, and the same way during where Pharaoh was reigning and during Joseph's time. And so here they are traveling. They're traveling about 1,000 miles from Persia to Jerusalem because they were made aware of a king being born. And not only that, there was this another character as we were thinking about this play and thinking about who's part of this play, who's part of the story. Well, there's a man named Herod. Actually, he was actually called Herod the Great. Somebody say Herod the Great. And when Jerusalem was under Persian control, before Roman control, Herod actually helped win the war against the Persian dynasty to gain Jerusalem and all of Judea. And so Rome actually gave him the title King of the Jews. So here is King Herod, all right, the Great, not only the Great, but also has this title, King of the Jews. which was a self-title, right? And so the Magi, who were Persian, had some history with Herod, and the statement here that is was said by the Magi is, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" And so think about that term as a king of the Jews already, all right? This self-title that he's given, and Herod the Great. And here are wise men, these wise astrologers, these ones that are coming, who have served and coming from Persia, coming to a king, saying, "Where is the king?" Wait. Aren't you like, I'm the king? What are you talking about? Right? Like, I'm the king. Where is the king? Born, right? Born king of the Jews. And so there was a threat to Herod's throne. It was a threat to his power and authority. It was a threat to his very throne. And so we see that the birth of Jesus is not just some Christmas story we tell our children, or a season that we celebrate with a tree and gifts, but that God actually was birthing his kingdom on earth that threatened every king and earthly kingdom. There was a birth of a kingdom, all right, in a time of kingdoms. At a time where there was a king was born. And so verse 2, it says then, and they asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" Now, when you think about infants, all right, when you think about infants, you don't think about a ruler, right? We may think it's cute if we saw toddlers playing with a crown, right? Mm-hmm. Right? That's cute, right? But we don't say, "Oh, hail king," right? And we don't just go and bow down, right? And so, but they're saying here that that a king is actually born. Like, this baby is actually born. And so even in the Israel's life cycle of kings, the youngest king that they experienced was Josiah, and he was 8 years old. Can you imagine 8 years old on the king? Probably can't even get on the seat, right? And so he probably needs a stepladder, right? And so here he is. They're saying that, and these are wise astrologers. These are ones who are elders and who are part of royalty, but they're specifically saying born king, which doesn't make sense because no one is born king. And so here we see that the moment that Jesus was born, he was king. The moment that he was born, he was king. That he didn't have to earn kingship. He didn't have to have someone tell him, "Oh, you're king." He didn't have to, go through some steps to be king. He didn't have to go through some school to be king. He didn't have to go through some ritual to be king. He was king when he was born. Because he was always king. And so kings, not only when you think about a king, they have a kingdom, right? And so a kingdom is a realm or a domain where the king rules over, and they actually establish a certain culture. And so when you go to a kingdom, all right, you're going to experience the way of life, their language, their food, and we celebrated multicultural Thanksgiving Sunday, and we were celebrating the diversity here that we have in our church of 20 or more different nations. That if we were go to your place of origin, I would experience something that nation would present as a culture, because I would taste their food, and I love food, right? And so whether it's Jamaican food or it's Italian food or whatever kind of food, and I love me some arroz con pollo, I love this incredible culture that we have in America, where it's actually coming to, especially in New York, that come together, and you could experience people's culture just by eating, right? And so we see here that culture is established by a king because there is a kingdom that they are ruling, and so they have a way of life. They're going to tell you what to do, how to do it. They're going to establish the way of thinking and behaving, and they're going to show that through this culture. And so if you're choosing to be part of this kingdom, you're going to have to think a certain way and behave a certain way, because there is a king in place. And so 700 years before Jesus is born, the prophet Isaiah says this about Jesus' birth. Look at Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. He says, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, All right, so check this out. A child is born, but a son is given. Meaning that, yes, there's a child that's born, there's a baby that's born, but there's something about that child. Not that just he's male, but this is the Son of God. Not only that, he goes on, he says, the government, all right, or the kingdom will be on his shoulders. And so can you imagine a little infant baby with that kingdom on his shoulders? That must be a little heavy there, right? And so we see that Jesus comes in, born with a kingdom on his shoulders, meaning that there's a government that he brings, there is a culture that he brings, and so how does that, what does that look like? And so when he continues, Isaiah continues, he's talking about the character of the king, and he says, he shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. The kingdom culture is actually defined, where he brings is defined by who he is. The culture is defined by who he is, his character. And so what does that look like? Well, he starts with Wonderful Counselor. He means that this king or this kingdom or this culture or this person is going to have every answer, is going to have he's going to be the counselor for every problem, every situation. There's nothing in this world, there's no problem, no situation that he doesn't have the wisdom to answer. That everything that we need, every answer in our life, that we can come to the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, who is not fazed by our problem, is not like, surprised by what we're going through, but he has an answer, he is full of wisdom, he's a counselor, and it says that he is a wonderful counselor. And so when we go to Jesus Christ, we can find the best counselor, and we don't have to pay someone else to counsel us. We can go to Jesus, go to his word, and says, I have an answer to every problem in my life. Not only that, he's describing Jesus as mighty God. He's saying that he has this power and authority, that he is God. Meaning that if he is God, then he has all kind of power. He has every power. He's omnipotent, meaning that he's all powerful. There's no king. There's no problem. There's nothing that's impossible with our God. Not only that, he's saying he's an everlasting Father. That means that he's ruling and exercising his power and authority as a loving Father and not a tyrant. That when, even if he has the power to destroy, even if he has the power to do whatever he wants and authority and he has the right to do it, he has a heart of a father. Yes. See, this is a different king. This is a different kingdom. This is a different culture. Why? Because the kingdom is characterized by the character of the king. And so we see here that not only that, he's saying that this Father doesn't leave, but he's saying he's an everlasting Father. And so when we encounter a Father's heart who says, I'm never going to leave you, I'm never going to forsake you, there's this incredible security. And see, we're so used to rulers coming and rulers going, and here we are going to elect another president next year, and so we see rulers coming and going, and there's revolving door of people that's trying to rule, trying to establish a culture, trying to establish a kingdom, but they fail because they can only be there for so long. It's a temporary kingdom, it's a temporary rule, but he's talking about an everlasting Father, a one that's going to say that I'm going to rule in your life, I'm going to be in your life, I'm never going to go, I'm never going to leave you, I'm never going to forsake you, even if you turn your back, I'm still running after you, I'm still coming after you, because I am the everlasting Father, the Father that doesn't abandon you, the Father that doesn't forsake you, like the one that is not surprised by what you are doing in your life, and I provide such a security. This is the king that we're talking about. Not only that, he says Prince of Peace, meaning that there's a peace that he brings, because God is not a God of chaos, and he's a God of order. And so when we experience worry and anxiety, and when we have wars and conflicts, and when we think about what's going on in this world, is Korea, what they're going to do? Are they going to create this nuclear bomb and bomb the whole world? And are we going to go into war with this person and this country? And are we this is going to happen? And here we are. We're trying to take all the weight of the world because Google said so. And so we Google everything. And so we have all this anxiety and all this worry. And who is this going to give? Who is going to give us peace? It's not a person. It's not a president. It's not a ruler. It's the kingdom of God. It's the very king that says, I am the Prince of Peace. If you're looking for peace, if if you're looking to deal with your anxiety, and if you're looking to deal with your worry, the only one that you can look to is King Jesus. Amen. And so he was called based on his character. See, culture is rooted in character. Culture is rooted in character. You cannot disconnect culture from character. So think about the last 4 years with Trump, right? Come on, some of the policies may be good, right? But some of the things that he has been saying, right? He's creating a culture based on his character, right? He doesn't know when to shut up. He doesn't know what to say and when to say it, right? He's speaking what he's thinking, right? There's no filter, right? And so we're seeing this toxic culture that's being created by a toxic character. And if you have toxicity, all right, a toxic culture in your home, a toxic culture in your workplace, a toxic culture in your neighborhood, it's because there are people who have toxic character. And so when God the Father wanted to bring heaven's culture to earth, he sent his son, Jesus, who was the exact representation of his character. Do you see that? If I'm going to bring my culture of heaven, who is going to represent the very character of who I am? Jesus Christ. And so Jesus becomes this representative, he's representing a culture that's rooted in his character. And so when verse 3, it says, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. Why was King Herod, the Herod the Great, Herod who's self-proclaimed as the king of the Jews, why is he and all the people afraid of this ruler? Why is this ruling? Why is they afraid of this baby? Right? Because he's not just any baby. Here's what it was not just hearing that the king was born, but the Magi said, look at what the Magi say. It says, when we saw the star, when it rose, we have come to worship him. That this baby, all right, deserves a worship. And that's the first thing that we have to talk about when we talk about the culture of heaven. When Jesus comes and brings a culture, the first place that we must understand about the kingdom culture is a worship. It's a worshiping culture. It's a culture of worship. Somebody say worship. Worship. And so these wise men, right? These wise people they were not dumb, right? They had credibility. And so here they are. They're coming and worshiping. And worship, actually, the word comes from the root word worth. Let me say worth. Worth. It means significance. It means valuable. It means of value. It means valued and appreciated, highly thought of, and deserving, and meriting, and honorable, and noble. So what was the Magi saying? That this baby had so much worth, so much significance, so much value, that we would travel 1,000 miles on camels for days, and we would actually spend a great deal of money getting here, risk our very lives to come here to worship this baby. That's why we see the response of fear in the king, a response of fear in Jerusalem. Why? Because it disturbed them. And here, in our lives, when we think about living a culture for Christ and the culture that he brings, as long as your Christ culture doesn't require sacrifice, doesn't demand worship, doesn't require your time and money, doesn't make you bold enough to address government, doesn't interfere with cultural norms and the culture of this world, is not going to be disturbed. The culture is not going to be disturbed by your faith, by your culture, and by you saying you're a Christian. But they were disturbed by Magi who were wise, who were royalty, who served in palaces, traveled 1,000 miles, gave everything to get there, risked their lives to come and bring worship to this baby. And because they saw the value of this baby, they saw who the baby was as the King of Kings. They saw something about the baby that deserved worship. Regardless of what they were going to pay, regardless of the sacrifice, regardless of who may not be agreeing upon it, even if Herod would kill them, they were there to worship the king. And let me tell you, if your faith is not requiring sacrifice, if you're not giving your worship to Jesus, if you're not sacrificing, giving your time ready to be ridiculed and persecuted for your faith and for your worship. Maybe because that's why nobody is disturbed by your faith. So once your culture interferes with the world culture, then you bring disturbance. You catch their attention, right? Like Jack Phillips. You go to the next slide. He owns a bakery. And he refused to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. And because of his Christian belief, right? In traditional marriage between man and woman, he was sued. But he won that suit. He won that case. Or, how about the New Orleans Saints? This is something that Brother Wally actually shared with me this week. And we're going to watch a video actually. New Orleans Saints linebacker Demario Davis, he was fined $7,000 for what? For putting on a headband that says "Man of God." Check this video out.
I am here because he placed me here. You know, he navigated the roads, all the things. I'm not here because, you know, I made all the right choices and I have this unique ability. Like, he had a lot of covering and protection over me. I was in a lot of places, a lot of times where I shouldn't have survived. You know, a lot of my friends didn't make it through what I made it through. And so a lot of that is just favor and protection from above. And I think he got me to a point to where I understood that, because I didn't understand that for 20 years of my life, 19, 20 years of my life. And then he got me to a point where I did understand it. And so I have so much gratitude and thanks for the times that he brought me through before I understood that now I just want to show my gratitude by living for him and making him known to other people who may be going through that same thing and feel like, you know, it's obstacle after obstacle, adversity after adversity, and they don't know where to look or know where to turn. And I'm like, look at me. I'll tell you where to turn. Turn up, look up.
Yeah.
He's there.
After all those big plays, you did it last season. You've really done it throughout your career. You put your arms out. Tell people about that. Why do you do that, first of all? You put your arms up and you pull one leg out.
So it's really to be reflective of Jesus on the cross. It's, you know, the Bible tells us to take up our cross daily. And Christians, as believers, we're called to be imitators of Christ. And the greatest thing that Christ did was dying on the cross. Without him dying on the cross, going to hell on our behalf, and then being resurrected to heaven, we don't have a chance to make it back to God. That's the gospel. That's the good news. Like, no matter what we've done, no matter what bad acts we've committed, there's eternity waiting on us. There's heaven, a possibility. All we have to do is accept Christ. And so what he did on that cross is what makes that possible. That's the most important thing about my belief system, about my identity, is what Christ did for me. Like, I won't go to heaven based on anything that I've done. Like, my life is jacked up and will continue to be jacked up. But it's all about this perfect man, this perfect guy who came in human form and died for us and made a way for us and died on the cross for our sins. And so that's me taking up my cross every time I make a play, is to hopefully turn somebody's eyes off of me and to the person who can save them.
And you literally became a billboard for that idea a few weeks ago. Week 3 of the game in the Dome, you wear a Man of God headband. It got you into a little bit of hot water for the NFL. Why did you do it knowing that they have a ban on personal statements on the uniform? Yeah,
so I actually had a sleeve that said Man of God. I've never worn it. And I had a headband that said, because the same people sent both of them. I was like, wow, that's nice. So I thought the headband was good because I've been wearing it since week 1. And it's under the helmet, too. And so I went out and I had to give the speech for Drew. And when I gave the speech for Drew, that, of course, went viral. And I think they saw it because I was giving the speech and had the headband. So it was like not really knowing or paying attention. And I wasn't really clear about the rule, like if it was covered up or, you know, if it was out and exposed. And so when I got the fine, I was just like, oh, man.
$7,000.
$7,000 fine. And I wasn't particularly clear about the rule.
Yeah, wouldn't it be religious expression? I mean, I don't know if religious expression would be off. I mean, in the country, it's not off limits. I don't know about the NFL. Is that would that be a personal message as well?
Yeah, it is a bit of a personal message, but I don't think the league is trying to be anti-religious or anything like that. They're just trying to, you know, that's part of uniform policy. No individual messing, whatever that may be, whether it's offensive, non-offensive.
No, because then it could turn to political and there'd be no end to this.
Yeah, so.
But what did you decide to do? You decided to appeal it.
Yes.
And then you tried to turn it into something else.
Yes.
What'd you do?
Yes, that was huge. You know, so I was in a conflict. So I'm like, man, this is strongly what I believe, and I can't do it. And because it says what it says, I really don't want to take it off. So that kind of explains the post. And then I was like, well, it would be proper for me to be obedient and follow the rule. And so I did that. But then I said, God's going to get glory from this headband whether I wear it or not. Now, I didn't know what that meant. And all of a sudden, me and my team, we came up with the idea of marketing headbands and using them for donations. And then I have a partnership with St. Dominic's, who I've been helping raise money for their emergency room. I said, why don't we just get the proceeds to go to them?
This is a hospital in Jackson.
A hospital in Jackson, Mississippi that's rebuilding this emergency room that's probably 20 years, past due for it. And, phenomenal people, great people. And so I said, let's do this. And the proceeds, and the way it happened, I think the first game, $30,000 was raised off, $25 headbands. And now it's over 60K has been raised.
And you got a matching grant.
And then there's a matching grant that the hospital has for every dollar that's raised already up to the next million. And so now it's up to 120K.
What did you think when you saw? I mean, people in New Orleans also really caught fever over this headband. There was a whole school, St. Louis, King of France. The kids came out with Children of God. They made their own headbands. It went viral all over the place.
Now, that was amazing. That was amazing. And that just shows you the power of God. I would have never thought this whole movement would have happened. And it's not just here in New Orleans. It's been nationally.
Right.
Orders have come from all over, and so, I think it's up to 5K headbands have been sold already. And to see the kids make the paper headbands was just unbelievable. And because if you reaching the kids, it's real.
Right.
Because kids they're not thinking, based on politics or anything like that. They're just thinking with what they feel.
Yeah.
And so it's cool because we planning on showing our gratitude to that school, here in the next couple of weeks. So
good.
That's gonna be fun, man. I can't wait to go out and just thank
Spend
all
a
of them.
time
But it's just been amazing, man.
And the good news is the NFL waived the fine.
And then they waived the fine. And so on top of that, it ended up, having something that was going to cost me $7,000. Now it's went in favor of the good $120,000, and didn't even have to pay that $7,000. So we just took that fine money that we were planning on paying to the league and just donated to the cause.
So we see here that our culture, how when we look to the culture of worshiping God, it is counterculture. It's going to have naysayers. It's going to be people who don't agree with what we do. Because worship is not convenient. It's going to be countercultural. It's going to disturb some folks. It is going to cause us that tension where you know which culture you're actually bowing to. It's going to cause this tension in you, saying, who am I really bowing to? Am I really bowing to the culture of the King Jesus, or the culture of this world? And so it's going to really authenticate your worship. It's going to show you. And see, the next slide, it says, growth is a result of resistance. The first church in the book of Acts, the reason why they grew was because of persecution. And a lot of times we're so comfortable in our worship, in our faith, and unless we are going through resistance, unless we are, and sometimes we're not taking those risks. We just want to be quiet, we just don't want to even talk about us being followers of Christ, right? But Demario Davis met with resistance. But in that resistance, what did he see? He saw growth, massive growth. So what he was going to experience, a $7,000 fine, resulted in thousands of dollars for a hospital, right? And why? Because his worship was authentic. He was willing to take a risk. He was willing to be ridiculed. He was willing to look, quote unquote, stupid, quote unquote, different, right? But he chose that worshiping God was the right thing to do. It was countercultural. It was the culture of heaven. And that is what we as Christians, those who follow Christ, choose to do as a culture. So it starts to develop your desire, and this level of worship grows through resistance. And once you remove the resistance, growth stops. So we see the Magi, their desire actually grew. Even when they heard Herod's response. Herod's response was really a resistance response. But in that, they grew to pursue Jesus anyway. And so number two, the second point is presence. Somebody say presence. So here we see that kings, when we think about King Jesus' kingdom, it presents a culture of presence. Look at verse 9. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. Verse 10. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. They were what? Overjoyed. Right? The scripture says, I was glad when they said unto me. Right? They didn't say, I was sad when they said unto me. Right? They were glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. See, King Herod didn't go with the Magi. He said, hey, listen, when you go find them, I'll bring him back. Tell me the news. He didn't go with them, go searching, go seeking, right? Because he was not after the presence. He was not after the presence of Christ. See, the culture is not going to endorse you and your worship. They don't want God because they have made themselves God. In that culture, as an emperor, emperors were worshipped as God. And they did not deny people from worshiping them. So King Herod was a representation of God himself. He exalted himself as God. But you look at verse 8. He says, go search, right? As soon as you find them, report unto me. And this is his false promise that he gives. A false promise to the Magi. Hey, listen, when you go find them, come back and tell me. But see, as those who are authentic worshipers, those who are looking to this king and the culture of the king, his presence is everything. That it's not going to be good enough that I met King Herod. It's not good enough that I just came to Jerusalem. It's not good enough that I just came 1,000 miles and got here and just reported about this baby. No. I need to be in the presence of Jesus. I need to be in the very presence of Jesus. It was the pursuit of his presence. The kingdom culture is about seeking God so that he may be found. It's not that he has been lost or he needs to be found. No. We're lost. And we need to get back to him. And we need to get back to the presence. When Adam and Eve sinned, and when God says, where are you? It wasn't a matter of location. Where are you? Are you lost? No. It's that they sinned and they were apart from the presence of God. They were hiding themselves from the sin and the guilt and the shame. And it's in our life too. But when we start to make gods and when we start to follow the culture and follow other gods in our life, and God is saying, hey, where are you? Where are you? You're lost. You've lost my presence. You've lost the value of my presence. You've lost the very king because I've come as Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God with us. God with man. And so when Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of God, the first thing I seek is the culture of God, his worship, his presence. I'm seeking to be in the midst of his presence where he is. And I don't care if nobody else is there with me. I'm there for Jesus. You don't have to come with the choir. You don't have to come with the church. You don't have to come with your family. Even if my spouse is not coming, even if my children are not coming, I've come not for them. I've come for the very presence of Jesus. Nobody else went with the Magi. They went by themselves because they were not there for anybody else. They came to the very presence of Jesus. They were looking for and seeking Jesus for him and him alone. Amen. And until it stopped. It was until it stopped over the child. It says it was then that they were overjoyed. Let me tell you, the pursuit of Jesus and his presence, that is the place where you find this overwhelming joy. When you're looking for happiness, when you're looking for joy, and you find it, and the only place that you can truly find authentic joy is in the presence of Jesus. Nothing else matters. Nothing else will do. It's only temporary. And so when even Jesus came to the woman at the well, she said, listen, go bring your husband. He says, I don't have a husband. Well, I know, because you had 5 husbands, and the man that you're living with is not your husband. And what she was doing was, she was trying to find joy. She was trying to find meaning. She was trying trying to find purpose. She was trying to find something that was empty, and no man could fill her joy. No man could fill her life. And Jesus was there, and he says, the very thing that you're looking for, the very thing that you're longing for is standing right in front of you. I am the presence that you're looking for. I am the joy that you're looking for. I am the happiness that you're looking for. I am the one that you're looking for all your life. Everything else is going to shatter. Everything else is temporary. Everything else will be lost. But the very thing that you have and will fulfill in your life is Jesus Christ, the very presence of Jesus. You're going to get presents this Christmas. People are going to give you this and gifts and the presents of gifts and here and there. Let me tell you, but that's going to fade because you're going to want more. You want another iPhone. You want another phone. You want another house. You're tired of the boots that you're wearing. You want new boots. And there is never a satisfaction in the accumulation of stuff. There's more and more and more. But when you get to Jesus, you understand He's enough. He's enough. He's enough. I just want Jesus. He's enough. The very presence of Jesus is enough in my life. And I've been through a cycle of addiction in my life. And no matter how much I try to strive for more and more, I can never get out of that cycle. Because what I'm craving for really is Jesus. Yeah. And I'm trying to substitute Jesus with stuff. And so the cigarettes didn't work, the drugs didn't work, the sex didn't work. All the things that you're trying to get can only be found in the very presence of Jesus. And there's this overflow of joy they experience that they've never experienced before once they were in the presence of Jesus.
Amen.
And see, here's the slide. Our emotions will always be attached to what we pursue.
That's right. Come on now.
Our emotions will always be attached to it. You want the emotion of joy. What are you pursuing? The world, the culture of the world, they go pursue more. Pursue the status. Pursue money. Pursue relationships. Pursue more. Pursue. And once you get it, here you are, trying to pursue something else. But Jesus says, if you seek me, you will find me.
Amen.
And so, when you get to Him, you're not disappointed. And sometimes you have to get through the obstacles. So sometimes you have to get through all the temporary stuff and past success and failures. But here they are. They didn't allow anything to stop their pursuit of this presence. Here's the last thing. Before I close. The third part of the culture of heaven that Jesus brought is giving. Somebody say giving. Giving. So here it says, when they're in this manger and they come, they worship, they bow down. They see Jesus, the King of Kings. They bow down and what did they do? They opened up their treasures and presented Him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. It says that they opened their treasure, whatever treasure they had, meaning that the value of what they were giving, they valued it. It was treasure. It was something of worth. But when they got to Him, everything else had no chance to compare of what they found in Jesus. Amen. That the value of Jesus didn't compare to the value of their treasures. So they were willing to give up what they thought was treasure for the treasure that they found in Jesus. One of the things that we have to grapple with in our life and have attention with is giving up the treasures in our life. And the reason why is because you have not found the treasure in Jesus. Amen. And I had to look inside of my heart and see that was a real struggle in my life. When I took a sabbatical for 6 months, right, about a couple of years ago, I think in 2017, and I was wondering, what do I do on this sabbatical? Ministry was everything to me. Being a pastor was part of my identity. I didn't understand what it would be, living a life, not being a pastor, not having a church, not being in ministry, not doing this. And so God had to get to the core of myself and says, you're Your identity does not revolve around what you do. Your identity is the very person of Jesus Christ and who He made you to be. And so you can lose the ministry, you can lose the church, but you'll never lose Jesus. There are things that we're holding on to that we're not willing to give up. And I was thinking, what is it in my life that I'm holding so tightly that I'm not able to let loose? Is it my children? Is your children your treasure? Everything revolves around your children. You give your very life for your children. You give your time, your money, and everything revolves around your children. And so you don't have time for worship. You don't have time for Jesus. You don't have time. But the very one that gave you the children blessed you with the gift of children. But now you become, the children become your God. And the very thing that you're praying, I can't wait to have a spouse. I can't wait to have him get married and walk down the aisle and say, I do. And here you are, got the spouse. Here you are, have a wonderful wedding. And here you are, enjoying each other. And then you forget about God. And you forget about church. You forget about worshiping. You forget about the presence. Because you understand that you started to make your spouse a God. And what Jesus reminds us is, everything you're holding on to, every treasure in your life, if you're not willing to give it up at the feet of Jesus, maybe you have not understand the value of the King of Kings. Maybe you not understand that there is a cultural shift and mindset and behavior that has to change if you're choosing to follow Jesus. Maybe because you've been wrapped up with the culture of this world and all this church, and you're saying, I want to be 1 foot in the church, 1 foot with Christ, and 1 foot in the world. It's not going to work, because one thing is, you're going to find disappointment in the world, find disappointment in the culture. And but when you start to say, I'm bowing down to the King of Kings, I found the presence, I found the very one that I've been longing for. I'm willing to give up the millions, I'm willing to give up the status, I'm willing to give up my family, I'm willing to give up everything because I found everything. Willing to give up everything because I found everything. So it's now. There's a temptation to go back to the worldly culture. And you know what you go to the next slide. Treasures we can't lay down turn into temptations we want to go back pursuing. See, they were going to go back to Herod, but they had a dream. God gave them a dream. He said, no, don't go back to Herod. See, Herod represented a culture. Herod represented a false God with false promises. And they were going to go back to them. But God reminded them, don't go. Because the wise man, because the Magi was able to lay down their treasure, that didn't become a temptation. Everything you're holding on to, the enemy will use to tempt you to worship, to give glory, to give honor, to give value above the King of Kings.